The Nigerian Upstream Petroleum Regulatory Commission, NURPC, yesterday affirmed the status quo remains with respect to ExxonMobil's Seplat Energy share acquisition. The clarification by NURPC Chief Executive Mr. Gbenga Komolafe followed an earlier statement that President Muhammadu Buhari had approved the acquisition, which effectively nullified the long-drawn-out attempt by the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, NNPC, to block the $1.283 billion sale and purchase transaction between Seplat Energies and Mobile Producing Nigeria Unlimited, MPNU.
The Commission works on the basis of clear provisions of the law and not on the basis of news that makes the round. And I said that the Commission had earlier transmitted the position of the law as approved by the Minister, who happens to be the President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. And as it stands, that position subsists, to the best of my knowledge. And as far as the Commission is concerned, nothing has changed. So the decline still subsists. And that is what is in alignment with the position of the law. And the Commission is the sole authority in that respect, in line with the provisions of the PI under Section 95, subsection 10, subsection 14, and 15. So the position stands. So we are not, as a Commission, working on the basis of news that makes the round. We work strictly on the basis of the position of the law.
In the face of dwindling revenue, the federal government is making frantic efforts to shore up its revenue base by stopping oil theft in the Niger Delta. Jemima Boloko reports.
The Federal Ministry of Petroleum Resources and the Nigerian security agencies have been visiting the Delta State government to stop oil theft in the Niger Delta. At a time when crude oil is seeking higher prices, Nigeria has been able to take advantage of these surges in prices of the commodity. Why? Because much of this commodity is stolen, while the revenues from the little sold are used to subsidize domestic consumption, since Nigeria has no functional refineries and has to buy refined petroleum products at the international markets only to subsidize the prices at home. Minister of State for Petroleum Resources Timi Sylvia, Managing Director of the Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation Limited Malaya Kyari, and the Chief of Defense Staff Lucky Rabo are in Delta State for an emergency meeting with the state governor Ifeanyi Okowa on how the state and the federal government can work together to put an end to oil theft in the country.
But what is critical now, the critical element that is left now is the support of the state government. And we thought we should come and ask you for your support so that we can work together.
Managing Director of the National Petroleum Corporation, Mele Kyari, says due to oil theft every month, the country loses about $1.9 billion monthly.
We're losing close to $1.9 billion every month as deferred revenues, either as a matter of losses or stealing or some form of activities that we're unable to bring production on the table.
The Chief of Defense Staff says the military can't tackle these criminalities alone, hence the need to engage communities in helping in fighting oil theft in Nigeria.
If those communities are appropriately engaged by the state governments, then of course close to 90% of the problem will be addressed.
The governor of Delta State says oil theft must be dealt with for economic development in the country.
Then the other process for engagement is by ensuring that we begin to skill our youths and ensure that they become entrepreneurs on their own, which takes away a lot of people from the unemployment market.
The Nigerian government is hoping to tackle oil theft in oil-producing states with the help of communities and security agencies. Jemima Boloko, Arise News, Asaba, Delta.
Right, Tunde, let's talk about this morning.
So much. I'll start with the first story about the Seplat ExxonMobil back and forth. This is clearly a case of executive overreach, and there's been a slap on the wrist of the executive there by the regulator, the NUPRC, whose CEO is Gbenga Komolafe, doing the Lord's work. I mean, do we want to be governed by the rule of law or not? The provisions of the law are clear. The PIA is clear, and he cited Section 95, various subsections, which, for the sake of time, I have them, but I won't really get into them. But just the point of it is what he's saying: to assign, transfer, novate your license or your rights, whether a prospecting license, petroleum mining license, it cannot be done without the approval of the commission. It's the commission that will convey approval or otherwise, not the president, not even in his capacity as Minister of Petroleum, because the PIA states quite clearly that it is the regulator's job, and that is why he's saying what he said, and he's well in order to do so. Now, what happened here is clearly embarrassing for the presidency, because like I said, it's overreaching, it's ultra-virus at this point. But it's just typical, isn't it? It's not unusual for a Nigerian businessman with access in the presidency to be able to pull certain strings and get the president to unwittingly comply. And many regulators might just turn a blind eye, but we have somebody like this who is really willing to obey the letter of the law, and I think he should be commended for that, Mr. Komolafe, in this regard, because the law is the law. The president is the one who got all the plaudits for appending his John Hancock to the PIA. Mm-hmm. And this is the same kind of embarrassment that we saw with the Electoral Amendment Act. Also, he was praised for that. That's going to be a huge part of his legacy. But within weeks, he went back to the National Assembly to amend that controversial clause 84, subsection 12. This looks like more of the same. We don't know whether we're coming or going half the time, it appears. And like I said, the law is the law. Once you've signed, you have signed. Which brings me to the next issue, the validity of this so-called assignment or transfer. When Seplat has, with ExxonMobil, the matter has now been taken to court by Seplat and also by NNPC, because you remember the sticking point here is that NNPC has the right of first refusal, and it's not some trumped up right. It is something that was reduced into writing and signed off by NNPC and ExxonMobil MPNU. According to their joint operating agreement, NNPC has the right of first refusal for that 40% of assets that forms ExxonMobil's share of that joint operating agreement. Unless NNPC chooses not to exercise that right, the sale to Seplat or any other party will have to be questioned, and it will be by the courts. And this is just another thing about appending your signature when you're not quite sure of the terms or not prepared to adhere strictly to the terms. Unfortunately, that's what it is in black and white. So Seplat, for all we know, could have been a more effective operator. Seplat is listed in both the Lagos and London Stock Exchange, and that has implications for the kind of corporate governance structure that they operate. I'm sure that would have been wonderful for the Nigerian oil and gas sector, because that's really what PIA was about. This could have been such a huge coup if it was handled properly, if it was handled really dotting the I's and crossing the T's really thoroughly, and unfortunately it hasn't. And this also sets us back in many ways in terms of our drive for foreign direct investment. How does this play out on the world stage? With this back and forth, it appears that the Nigerian government does not know what it's doing, is not conversant with the clauses of its own laws. I think it's really rather embarrassing. And then you now have this other embarrassment of the oil theft, how we're just hemorrhaging money, and it's clearly a grand operation. These are not the activities of some ragtag group of people. And it's quite clear that we are not that backward where it comes to information and intelligence, in spite of all appearances to the contrary. It's clear to me that those who ought to know do know who is responsible. But the only thing missing is a political will to clamp down on the activities that are proving ruinous for the rest of us Nigerians.
I mean, you made very valid and great and fantastic points there, Tundu, about oil theft and that. But I just want to quickly just piggyback on what you said about the PIA. We all celebrated when the PIA came on board, and we all got excited about the fact that the deals that were pending in the last 20 years in Nigeria can now be done. And we're excited that we've seen a deal on the table. This Seplat deal, taking some of Mobil's assets, which a lot of people are saying, yes, is it an indication of what is happening? Because when you look at other people that have bought fields and the likes in Nigeria, crude oil theft is killing them. And I'm happy that we juxtapose the story with crude oil theft. I think it was Mr. Elumelu that came out at some point and cried and lamented.
He did.
How crude oil theft is really affecting the business. They can't even produce the capacity and all of that. But after the PIA, we're excited about Seplat. And what Seplat is doing, like you said, is listed here and in the UK, quite a very, responsible company based on what they've done and what they've been able to achieve at a point in time in this country and what they're still achieving. It will unlock more potentials, increase their BPD production per day to about 95,000 or thereabouts. A lot of possibilities. But it goes back to the question of what is on ground. Let's not forget that NNPC Limited launched a couple of weeks ago. And to fanfare and joy, and everybody was excited about it. The president was there and said, oh, it's not going to be business as usual. NNPC will run due corporate governance and everything. And when this deal was passed, I would assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that those assets in the JV were assets that NNPC will need. Because when you dial back, NNPC, also the shareholders in NNPC, Ministry of Finance and the likes, Treasury and all of that, they represent us, the Nigerian people. So the big question is, part of these assets the NNPC have that they could also turn around to get more money for the Nigerian people, put more money to the Federation purse. Why all of a sudden, when the regulator, the independent regulator and all of this, has said no way on this deal, why all of a sudden did something happen that somebody went to the president at the back and he accepted a deal against the Nigerian people with the NNPC? Because that's what it looks like to me, except you explain otherwise. Because in all of this contention, NNPC is now nimble, as they say, it's now a private company. It will need those assets to be able to trade in this space and get some income. So why did the president go against NNPC to favor Seplat? Those are questions we should ask. Secondly, like you stated in the rule, section 95, subsection 14 and 15, talks about the fact that all of this transfer and anything with shares must go through the Regulatory Commission. So who advised the president on this deal? Who advised him? Who told him about it? Did he talk to people close to him? I mean, we've seen many reports about the president talking to the Attorney General. And somebody will have thought that the president will have sought the legal consent of the Attorney General as regards this deal. So who told him to go ahead with this deal as against the laws on ground that we all signed to? And secondly, the Regulatory Commission. It is a bad omen for Nigeria. And it looks very sad that the presidency is now exchanging words with the Regulatory Commission. You know what it shows? It shows that there's no cohesion in the house. That there's a madhouse going on there. All of a sudden, the Regulatory Commission, and because you know what, in Nigeria, do you know what this Mr. Gbenga come life, there will be implications because people will go ahead and attack him.
He really stuck his neck out.
He stuck his neck out. I'm not going to be surprised.
That's why I praised him.
Yeah, and it's good to praise him, but I'm not going to surprise him if he loses his job. Because for the very first time, the Minister of Petroleum, which is the President, and is now going against the regulatory, NURPC, Regulatory Commission. Both of them are fighting back and forth now in public glare.
But he can't lose his job. Are we paying mouth service or lip service to the rule of law? Or do we actually practice it?
We must.
He is citing the
Rule
provisions of the law.
So. But we all know what happens to the rule of law in Nigeria. If the rule of law was respected, are you telling me that there was no person to advise the president of this deal in the first place? It's because we don't pay attention to the rule of law. And humor me about the rule of law in Nigeria, Tundu. Should we go down memory lane about the rule of law?
Let's not.
Or the rule of lawyers, as I would say. Humor me about the rule of law. Oh, so much rule of law. So we have seen. But see, this doesn't discount the fact that we are excited, number one. And these are the positives we could take from this deal. That at least deals are already coming back because of the signing of the PIA. These are good signs with this Seplat deal. But also, I'm a little iffy that foreign players are not coming. Nigerian players coming to play is a good thing.
Yes, it is.
It is a very good thing. I'm happy about Seplat. But I'm a little iffy that what is it that foreign players are seeing that they are pulling out?
Oil theft, perhaps.
So, if that's the case, how can we make it very competitive that foreign players can come in and Nigerian players too can come in? How is it the case that all of a sudden Okay, so how is it that when all of this happens, all right, then there's this back and forth as regards oil theft, like you said. Also, let's not also forget that people that are playing in this sector are also complaining that they are losing a lot of revenue. So in going forward, those are the things we should fix. And those are the things we should look at.
It's been fixed and it's going to happen. I always like to be positive, and
It's
you're
going to
not going
happen.
to derail
No,
me.
and
I think it's very important that this has happened today. We always talk about how, oh, nothing works in Nigeria, the laws mean nothing, but we can clearly see hope springs
And I'm
eternal.
excited, and that's why I'm
Yes.
excited about the second VT we took, that this has been taken seriously. The Delta State governor and the top military brass met, and the Navy has been pushing back as regards oil theft. More can be done to be able to make it better, for players from everywhere to come into this sector. And in the end, Nigeria should win. That's my priority.
That's really all.
Yeah.
But I would like to see some people being prosecuted. Yes, the Navy is doing a sterling job. They have been recording a lot of gains with regards to combating oil theft. But we need to get to the bottom of it. I do think that there's a conspiracy that needs to be exposed here, and people need to be prosecuted. We can't just say, okay, let's stem the bleeding. Who is responsible? We need to know.
All right. Moving on to the next story, the former governors of Plateau and Taraba State, earlier convicted for corruption, have now been released from prison. Senator Joshua Dare and Jolly Yame were among the list of 100 inmates granted state pardon by the National Council of State, chaired by President Buhari 4 months ago. Both men were serving jail terms on corruption charges. Dare, who governed Plateau State between 1999 and 2007, was convicted of criminal breach and trust and misappropriation of funds to the tune of 1.16 billion, while Yame, meanwhile, was sentenced to 12 years in prison for stealing 1.6 billion. The state pardon has continued to generate uproar among Nigerians. Right, Tundu?
Well, this is one executive power that no regulator can query, surely. The Constitution gives this right to the president, and he has exercised it as he deems fit. However, it does seem a bit strange, given the personal profile of President Buhari, this paragon of asceticism and with his tough stance against corruption, to grant his pardons to these gentlemen, considering what they were convicted of doing. And this is exactly why a lot of people in the media at the time, I remember so many editorials, there were so many articles about it. There was an uproar among a lot of journalists at the time about this pardons, but he has exercised his own prerogative. But I just wonder how this might impact the war against corruption, which is one of those cancers that we deal with in this country. I wonder how it affects morale in the EFCC, for example, because they must have worked so hard to actually get convictions. We know how many prosecutions begin and completely fall apart in court. It's actually very, very difficult to get a conviction, the kind of work that went into it, only to see it fall apart in this fashion. And what kind of message it sends to people who are practicing all manners of corruption. It does send a message that you will get away with it. And that's really what's unfortunate about this whole situation.
Really unfortunate. Just some correction here. The NNPC, I kept on saying it's a private company, but it's just been commercialized, with the shares are still held by Ministry of Finance Incorporated, Ministry of Petroleum Resource and all of that. And it's still a state-owned entity, albeit, a commercial one. I just had to put that out there as much as I can. Great point you made, Tundu. When I saw this pardon finally effected, I asked somebody, I said, what was the year the crime was committed? And when the person replied, I said, what's the time value of money then and now? So now when we even report it, we feel it sort of like even mitigates the effect of the crime. 1 billion as at 2000 and late 2000s, if my memory serves me right, was quite a colossal amount.
Okay, you have to factor in inflation with corruption cases.
Yeah, also factor in inflation and all of that year on year. It's quite a colossal amount. And to think that after all of this, a pardon goes through, and now they've finally been released. And the pardon means that it's never on record that they ever did anything.
Yes.
Yeah. They were never corrupt.
They've been cleared.
They were never convicted. That's what it means. So you don't even have a right to tell them that, oh, you were once convicted. No, they are clean, squeaky clean. They've never been convicted of any crime in this country. And like you said, Tundu, it feeds back into the fight against corruption. And it's all this administration. We all remember the time of Goodluck Jonathan and Alamisi Asaga. It feeds back into the fight against corruption. Because poor people steal 100,000 in the market, or no, less than 10,000 naira, and lynch mobbed. That is not to say that lynching people without taking them through the law process is good, and we condemn that. But we see the effects. And we've also seen other corrupt cases where people just do a plea bargain and they run away like nothing happened. And they're all cleared and they're walking free today. But in the same breath, we are saying we're fighting corruption. And not only this case, we've also seen cases of all of a sudden the Attorney General says, oh, there's an early prosecute, and it's all over.
But he has that power.
And he has that power. So, prerogative of mercy is not supposed to be a bad thing. But it is the way it is being used. And it's not only in Nigeria. I can give you examples ad nauseum for other climes.
Oh, yes,
America,
Bill Clinton.
Trump, Bill Clinton, and the likes.
That was quite the scandal.
And that's why I say, if we truly are ready, a couple of suggestions. Let's make this prerogative of mercy more independent and more in the hands of people. Set up different stakeholder groups. People living with disability, women group, or societal pressure groups. And let them debate people recommended for the prerogative of mercy. And vote on it. And let the vote be binding. I think, to a large extent, that will go a long way in solving all of this.
What we have now is a presidential committee.
Yeah, but what we have is a presidential committee.
It's not a cross-society
It's not a cross-society committee. So maybe if we have that, then things will go a lot better. But I understand the time is not our friend. That's all on News Alert.